Hello, everybody. Today, the genocide that I'm going to be talking about in my presentation is the genocide against the Cambodians. So, what are the ethnic groups in this genocide? So, the ethnic group that was like the one causing the genocide was the Khmer Rouge group. They took rule of Cambodia in 1975 and they persecuted many ethnic minorities, particularly the Vietnamese, the Cham Muslims, and the ethnic Chinese ethnicities. So those were the ethnicities that were being attacked in this genocide. So, what is the social construction of this particular situation? So the definition of social construction of ethnicity is the idea that ethnicity is not fixed on a biological reality, but a social concept created and defined by people through shared culture elements like language, food, and traditions. So, what is the difference between these two groups? The Khmer Rouges were not a separate ethnicity that from all of the regular Cambodians, but they had different political ideologies. The Khmers believed in a revolutionary political movement and leadership driven by Maoist-inspired agrarian communism. They specifically targeted the Vietnamese, Cham Muslims, and ethnic Chinese, Lao, and Thai. They wanted to eliminate anyone who they did not feel fit their agrarian vision. So these ethnic groups were not seen as, what they thought was pure, I guess you could say. So basically, they wanted Cambodia to kind of stay how it was. They didn't want other ethnicities or other, they wanted everyone to be equal in Cambodia, and they didn't want other people who had higher power in Cambodia influencing that, or other ethnicities that they felt like did not fit their ideals of what Cambodian people should look like. That's what they would get rid of. Whether even if you were Cambodian and they felt like you did not fit what they thought a Cambodian should be, you were a target in this genocide. So why did they feel so superior to the other people? The Khmer Rouge's policies were guided by its belief that the citizens of Cambodia had been tainted by exposure to outside ideas, especially by the capitalist West. This was after the civil war within Cambodia and Vietnam. So they persecuted the educated, so such as doctors, lawyers, current or former military, and police. They targeted them because they felt like they didn't want them to think that they were higher than everyone else after, in this time. They also were against Christians, Buddhism, Muslims, citizens they were also targeted. And this was all in an effort to create a society without competition in which everyone worked for the common good. So that's why if they felt like you were a Cambodian, but you still were higher than everyone else, or they felt like you thought that you were higher than everyone else, you also were targeted, and other ethnicities that they felt like did not fit the Cambodian vision that they had, you were targeted. They specifically viewed the Vietnamese as a historical enemy. They thought that almost as kind of how we thought of communists during the Red Scare in America, that's kind of what they thought as Vietnamese people. They were thought that they were Vietnam spies coming into their country to corrupt their country, when realistically that was not true, the same as it was during the Red Scare when the US thought that there was communism everywhere. So that's kind of to give you a better perspective of why they targeted the Vietnamese so much, because I thought they were a historical threat. So during this genocide, they basically, if they felt like you did not fit their views of what a Cambodian citizen should be, or you did not believe in what they believed, they would either kill you or they would send you to work camps. One of the main prison camps was the Toulouse Center, known as S21. You would get sent there, and they were prison camps basically, and you would be worked to death, starved to death, tortured to death at these camps. So that's basically what happened during this genocide. So was this ethnic genocide is another question that we had. And I think in this particular historical event, I do believe that it was ethnic cleansing. even though it was not necessarily one specific ethnicity that was being cleansed, I do think that it was, and it was more of like a political motive. I do think that a lot of ethnicities that were not Cambodian were targeted because they felt like they were not pure. So I do think that it was ethnic cleansing, because even though they were also attacking like their own Cambodians and their own people, they were generally attacking minorities who came into Cambodia and were not like original Cambodians. So I do think that it was ethnic cleansing because they were getting rid of other ethnicities because they felt like they were not pure in their eyes. So I do think yes. And how long did this genocide go on? So it basically started in April 1975 when the communist group, the Khmer Rouge, seized control of Cambodia and renamed the country the Democratic of Kampuchea. But then the Khmer Rouge were removed from power when the communist Vietnam invaded in January of 1979 and established a pro-Vietnamese regime in Cambodia. So it was about 4 years long of mass genocide going on, so that is a lot of people dying within 4 years. Many things that were going on and effects that were happening during this genocide were the Khmer Rouge would place people into collective living arrangements or communes, and enacted re-education programs to encourage the commune lifestyle. So it would basically like re-educate or ethnic cleanse these people into what they thought Cambodian people should believe and how they should act. And people who refused to do these re-education programs were killed in the fields surrounding the commune or were sent to the camps like the Tilu Slay Center known as S21. And over the 4 years of this mass genocide, the Khmer Rouge killed around 1.5 to 3 million people through just killing and just shooting, or through work, starvation, and torture. Some of the social conflict patterns that we talked about in our chapter that kind of showed through in this mass genocide was expulsion was a big one. So the regiment attempted to expel ethnic Vietnamese from Cambodia entirely. They were trying to get rid of them, and they were either forced across the border or killed. So they were trying to get rid of the Vietnamese culture and ethnicity out of Cambodia. And also another one was assimilation was going on, because the Cham Muslims were banned from speaking Cham and wearing their religious clothing or practicing any Islam cultures. And ethnic Chinese were also forbidden to speak Chinese or keep their Chinese customs that they had originally come into Cambodia with. And also some influence migration that happened during this was a lot of these ethnic groups, mainly Vietnamese people, were forced out of the country either unwillingly or willingly because they just didn't want to be around this. They didn't want to be in this situation, even after everything kind of played out. And after the Khmer Rouge got, removed from power, a lot of them still didn't want to come back or still wanted to leave because they weren't sure if there were people that still had the beliefs that the Khmer Rouge did, and they just wanted to avoid the situation entirely. So there was a lot of ethnicities that left Cambodia due to being forced out and just not feeling welcome and not wanting to be there and avoiding the danger and the judge and the society that did not welcome them anymore. So who were people who helped, and what were things that helped during this mass genocide and during these 4 years? Many camps were established at many bordering countries on the borderlines, especially Thailand and Vietnam. They were main contributors to border camps. And large numbers of people in Cambodia eventually moved to Western countries, including the United States, France, Australia, and Canada. And a lot of those Western nations, like the US, France, Australia, Canada, accepted Cambodia refugees for resettlement, which is why a lot of them went there. And then they also funded UN and NGO relief operations to help these people. And Vietnam ended up being the ones who overthrew the Khmer Rouge in the end. So they were the ones who actually stopped the genocide and stopped the whole 4 years of killing. So the most significant takeaways that I took away from, researching this was it wasn't necessarily one ethnicity versus another ethnicity, or like a group of people thinking that this particular ethnicity is bad and they are just not good. It more was like a political motive on thinking like, we want Cambodia to look this certain way. We want this we want our people to act a certain way and be a certain way, and we feel as some of these ethnicities do not fit that way, and so we're gonna get rid of them. And we also feel like some of these Cambodians, our own people, do not fit the ideals that we have either, so we will also get rid of them. So it wasn't necessarily one ethnicity versus their own, because the Khmer Rouges were not an ethnicity. They were not different from they were not a different ethnicity than Cambodia. They were just a political group that came together and overthrew Cambodia and overthrew their own people and other ethnicities within Cambodia. So I think the biggest thing that I kind of took away is, like, I always just felt like when we talk about, like, mass genocide and stuff like that, like, we always just kind of assume, like, okay, it was one ethnicity or one group of people versus an entirely different ethnicity or different group of people. But it actually was kind of different in this situation, and it wasn't necessarily ethnicity versus ethnicity, but it was political ideals versus another one, which is, I almost feel like what we kind of have in America now, like when it comes to, like, you know, left and right, like we almost kind of have that as well, where it's like we're all one, but we are so divided, and we have such, like, we also have that, you know, hate towards each other because of a political ideal. And so it just kind of like made me realize, like, it's not always just ethnicity versus ethnicity when it comes to mass genocide and stuff like that, and then when it comes to hatred towards others, it's also a lot of it is backed by political ideals. So that's kind of what I took away from what I researched. But yeah, that's what I found about the Cambodian genocide.